Massive attacks, monumental errors, and officially indicted. Plus this day in history with the Bay of Pigs and our song of the day by Tanika Charles on your Morning Monarchy for April 17th, 2017. I am James Evan Pilato for MediaMonarchy.com. Welcome back to another week of listener-supported media. We are brought to you by you. We've been online since 9/11/05, and it's all thanks to you. MediaMonarchy.com/support has the PayPal, the Patreon, the Bitcoin, the snail mail, and any number of ways you can help support our work. A huge thanks to our latest patrons at patreon.com/MediaMonarchy. That's Christopher G., Tom C., and Leslie B. That gives us the monthly support that we need to keep going and growing, my friends. Also, a huge thanks to David S. and a very unlikely sounding donor to Media Monarchy, the Sports Store. Huge thanks, huge love to the Sports Store, David S., Tom C., Leslie B., Christopher G., and everybody else. Also, of course, the mystery Bitcoin donor. If you don't actually tell me who you are, email me or something, I don't know. It's just this 30-character string of numbers and letters. So whoever that is, the latest Bitcoin donor, a huge thanks to you. And I hope you had a fantastic, safe, and wonderful and beautiful weekend. I should say first, huge thanks to the Truth Seeker app for carrying your Morning Monarchy and for RadioConfluence.com for simulcasting all of your Media Monarchy broadcasts. That's your Morning Monarchy Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pump up the volume, your daily DJ set at noon each day, 12 p.m. Pacific time. All at MediaMonarchy.com/listen. That's the easiest way just to share the show with friends. Like, hey, you can listen live. He's on every day. He's like a real radio guy or something. Had a fantastic weekend meeting a couple of Media Monarchy fans. Alex and Kayla, huge thanks to them. They were passing through the city, so we got together, had a little pizzas, had a little drinks, had a little ramens, had a few more drinks, and a fantastic time over the weekend as they, I think, enjoyed their time here in Portland, as it was a pretty beautiful weekend. We also had here on our Easter Sunday, what back east we just used to always call a clothes swap. Oh, we're going to have a clothing swap party. Oh, sweet. Sometimes it's just guys or just girls. Sometimes it's co-ed. We moved out here and started to mention, we're going to have a clothing swap. And people say, oh, you mean a naked lady party? Yes, yes, I do mean a naked lady party. You're exactly right. So out here on the West Coast, apparently clothing swaps are sometimes called naked lady parties. And so Cassie threw one, and we had just a couple of friends over, and she gave it the very sacrilegious branding of resurrect your closets with a clothing swap on Easter Sunday. So we had a good time with that, had a little bit of brunch, and of course, as is pretty much a yearly tradition for me, I don't remember when they actually started streaming Coachella, but for several years now, I know I've at least been watching it for the last 5 years. The big California concert they do in April called Coachella is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and it's a big, massive, days-long musical festival, and it's pretty much live music from 3 in the afternoon till 1 in the morning. So I enjoy turning that up, cranking that up, and got to see pretty awesome sets from bands that I dig, like Tennis and the XX and DJ Shadow. I got to watch live the epic Radiohead technical difficulties meltdown. I was actually watching it along with my buddy Mike in Philly, who was, of course, hours later on the East Coast, and we're both watching it and suddenly go, dude, did audio just drop for you? Yes, apparently it did. Pretty massive meltdown for radio and their big Friday night headlining set. Also got to see Future Islands. Amazing sets last night from Tycho and New Order, and closed it all out with the French madmen known as Justice. So I hope you caught some of that. And again, hope you had a good time. What did I even just kind of glance back at the chat and saw that people saw, crazy relatives and wine and good weather and good times and good weekend. It can be tough to have a good weekend because the specter of horrific news seems to just hang over us at each and every turn. Your Morning Monarchy is hopefully a daily, live, fear-free look at what's really going on in the news. Won't always be good news by any stretch, but we can hopefully look at things in a positive way, in a solutions-oriented way, and I try and give you the subtext and context. Again, we've been around for a long time. I love having a website that's been online for many moons. And a lot of times we can dig back in the archives and say, we've talked about these stories. We've talked about these things when they were just the seeds being planted, and now they bear fruit in a lot of ways. That's also, I think, the long-running success of New World Next Week. Put it on the record, then it happens. Each day of your Morning Monarchy, we focus in on a different area of the news. Fridays, entertainment. Thursdays, conspiracies. Wednesday's health, Tuesday's tech, but Monday is world news, and we call it geopolitics. Hashtag geopolitics, spelled with a K, commie style. If you've got stories from around the world, you can submit those via Twitter, and that's how they get into the show. We are not only crowdfunded, but we are crowdsourced as well. Let's take a glance at some of the breaking lamestream news. And it's difficult to, even to say President Trump. It's not something that easily rolls off the tongue or seems like a normal thing. Melania Trump kicks off 139th annual Easter egg roll. And we've talked about snuff TV, streaming murder. It's only been growing, and I think it's only going to get amplified because it gets massive news. We've said it a billion times. Lauren Coleman wrote the book on the copycat effect. When you give massive news coverage round the clock, 24/7, multi-state manhunt underway for suspect in Facebook homicide video. Local, state, and federal law enforcement officers are frantically searching for a suspect accused of shooting and killing a 74-year-old man Sunday in Cleveland and then posting a video of the cold-blooded slaying on Facebook. It's kind of like we live in The Running Man. And that's been the plan for a long, long time. So the more hype it gets, the more you're going to see these copycat effect events. We've also got Pence warning North Korea, and we will get into that a little bit later in this episode. But as I, sign into the lamestream news, it's also going to give me some of my local things. As they always say, the personal is political, the local is global. There's an opinion piece up on the Oregonian, Portland pandering to extreme fringe, and they're basically talking about how Portland is divesting in companies. And we talked about this on New World Next Week many years ago. Portland was actually divesting itself of corporations they didn't want to make money off of in the stock market. Elise Cohn has written an article basically lambasting this and saying corporations are our friends. Those tractors you think are evil in Palestine, they also do all the construction here in Oregon for generations. All those computers and printers and internet things from those evil corporations? Let's see you complain about this without those. The other interesting bit from Portland, as it relates to this weekend, was the big tax day marches you saw all around the world. Yes, it was Theft Day. Technically, April 15th in the States is tax day. But because it fell on a weekend, we actually get until tomorrow, April 18th, to file your thefts. So I believe all around the country, they had protests. And what were the protests about? Oh, that taxation is theft and unfair? No, they love taxes, and they want to make sure everybody pays way more of them, and they definitely want to see America's next top president's tax returns. Because I don't know if you've heard, guys, I think this is the first corrupt president we've ever had. Stop the presses. People are freaking out. It must be frustrating for so many Oregonians who want to enjoy a beautiful sunny Easter weekend in Portland to have perpetual professional AstroTurf protesters disrupting their day with politics, especially over an issue that only fringe activists care about. What taxpayers really care about is tax relief and simplification as they agonize to prepare their returns and write hefty checks to the IRS over the weekend. They won't get help with that from these protesters. So said the Oregon Republican Party. And that's what we had all around here in Portland. Portland, the city of, ooh, us too, we want to protest. What are we protesting? Again, a giant free pass for the last 8 years here in Portland. They loved Obama starting 5 more wars to Bush's 2. You won't hear a thing about it. And this is the phony baloney left-right paradigm world that we try not to get involved in. And I'm sure, like me, like you, a lot of us sometimes have to spend our days tightrope walking the phony left-right paradigm. I don't want to piss off my family. I don't want to piss off my bosses. I am still trying to get along in this life. I don't live out in the woods on my own land yet. Yeah. So you know where I'm going in the chat. You're already there. And again, we appreciate you listening live. It's the Morning Monarchy. It is Monday, April 17th, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com, coming to you from Media Monarchy Studios up here in Peak, Portland. Hey, everybody, you should all move here right now. It'll get better with each and every one of you that gets here. So we go from ridiculous left-right paradigm protests in Portland, which easily sets the stage for the madness we saw over the weekend in Berkeley.
On the West Coast, I want to take you there where protesters supporting and opposing President Trump are clashing in Berkeley, California. This video was just moments ago, a fight breaking out among the crowd there, and it really escalated quickly. We watched this. We do know 4 people have been arrested and a couple of people have minor injuries, but we're working to get more information on exactly what is going down and what police are doing about it. Now, we have video, again, from moments ago that you are watching right now, fighting happening in the streets of Berkeley, California during protests among supporters of President Trump and those who are opponents. Police also tell us they've confiscated a number of items from the crowd, something they call contraband from demonstrators, like a knife, some wooden sticks. We are working to get more information on exactly what's happening. Last check, things seem to have calmed down just a little bit, but it doesn't take much for a scene like this to break out, as we've been watching these pictures for some time now.
Yeah, that's not my dramatic string music. You know, I don't do that sort of thing. I keep it chill and dub style. No, it's the news that's going to ratchet up the chaos. And the scenes, which everything we say and play, always included in the show notes. You can see those chaotic scenes that you've seen before in video games and terrible movies. And they seem about as real. Pro-Trump supporters and anti-Trump protesters were clashing because those are the only 2 paradigms we will ever entertain on your corporate news. I like Coke. Yeah, Pepsi's better. That's all poison, and I don't want to have any. Shut up. Shut that guy up. They don't want to hear any of that. It looks about, well, doesn't look, it would be like one of those Royal Rumble matches where there's a bunch of people, but it's about as consequential as WrestleMania was just the 2 weekends ago. It means as much and it symbolizes as much. It's phony staged protests. Now, unfortunately for them, they're not getting the kind of paycheck that The Undertaker and the other guys are getting. They have a much better script going on at WrestleMania. It's not kind of this ad hoc situation, but about as consequential. Taking part in those kind of fights, you may as well be playing WrestleMania. It does not matter. Like Corbett said, like Clyde said, like everybody said, you're not really going to care if it's a Republican or Democrat boot on the face of humanity forever. But they want you to think that that part matters. And they won't give you the subtext and they won't give you the context. The Washington Post, speaking of not telling you things, is allowing writer Ed Rogers to push for and praise military action against Syria without disclosing that he's a lobbyist for Raytheon, which, as you may have heard, makes the Tomahawk missiles ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching used in the recent strike. Again, to mention Corbett, his fantastic latest entry in his satirical conspiracy theory videos, The Syria Strikes. If you've not seen that, that was pretty much the best thing on the internet over the last week. Rogers, this is the Washington Compost's Ed Rogers, is a contributor to the Post's Post-Partisan blog, where he wrote an April 8th piece praising President Donald Trump for authorizing the launch of 59 Tomahawk missiles at a Syrian airbase that reportedly housed warplanes that carried out reported chemical attacks against reported civilians. In the piece titled, "Could it be? Is President Trump on a roll?" Rogers wrote that Trump received bipartisan support for his military strike in Syria and added that the fact that Trump launched an attack against Syria while his Chinese counterpart was present and able to witness the aftermath in the media was a powerful stroke of good luck for the White House. In case Xi Jinping of China needed any reminding of just how serious Trump may be about taking action in North Korea, the Syria attack couldn't have been a better example or come at a better time. Rogers previously criticized President Obama for failing to intervene in Syria. In a December 19, 2016 Post piece, he wrote, quote, "As troubling as it is that Obama and the Democrats allow the Russians to interfere in the election and engage in cyber warfare without ramifications or evidence of any of that, we shouldn't be surprised. After all, it is the Obama administration that has capitulated to Iran at every turn and stood by as Syrian government forces, facilitated by the Russians, slaughtered hundreds of thousands in Syria, now more than ever. It's clear it's time for an urgent change in our foreign policy. Obama and his team cannot leave office soon enough." Because Ed Rogers writing for the Washington Post and lobbying for Raytheon, knows they need more money. Oh, economy looking bad? Let's start a war. Hey, let's start 7, 8, 9 wars. How many are going now? Hell, aren't we sending people back to Somalia? I believe I just read over the weekend. I don't have that on that stack here of world news, but it should be included. And the 10 stories we choose each and every day from the hashtag, there's dozens and dozens and dozens more stories. If you're just interested in the world news shows, you can just follow my hashtag geopolitics, and you will get a well-rounded batch of world news. Same goes for each and every subtitle. Hashtag episode subject. Now, I've been through Moab, Utah a couple of times, and it is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in my life. But unfortunately, sharing the name with Moab is the mother of all bombs.
The massive GBU-43 bomb is nicknamed the mother of all bombs. Military experts say it is meant to explode above ground and that its blast is terrifying. This is the first time it has been used in combat. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer called the bomb a large, powerful, and accurately delivered weapon.
We targeted a system of tunnels and caves that ISIS fighters used to move around freely, making it easier for them to target U.S. military advisors and Afghan forces in the area. The United States takes the fight against ISIS very seriously, and in order to defeat the group, we must deny them operational space, which we did. The United States took all precautions necessary to prevent civilian casualties and collateral damage as a result of the operation.
President Donald Trump praised the bombing.
We are so proud of our military, and it was another successful event.
The president was asked if he authorized the strike.
Everybody knows exactly what happened, and what I do is I authorize my military. We have the greatest military in the world, and they've done a job as usual. So we have given them total authorization, and that's what they're doing.
Asked if the U.S. was trying to send a signal to other countries by dropping such a massive bomb, the State Department spokesman declined to comment.
Look, I'm not going to attempt to speak way outside my box and talk about, military matters.
Military experts say because this bomb has never been used before, the key question will be if it was effective at destroying the ISIS target while not killing civilians.
Yeah, of course. I don't know exactly how something can be accurate. It's accurately delivered within a mile. Try that with your job, or with pizza delivery, or with anything else that isn't the monumental, massive attack destruction of life all around the world. The Air Force developed the Moab in 2003, but it had never been used in combat until Thursday. The Pentagon produced 15 of these fucks at the cost of $16 million per unit. Now again, don't worry that my roads ain't fixed. There ain't no money for my schools or none of that. And we always want to talk about the language as well. You remember always hearing mother of all blank. Our buddy Head in the chat notes that Saddam was the originator of calling things the mother of all blank when he promised that Gulf War I was going to be the mother of all battles. And we see this repeated over and over and over again. And again, we only laugh to not cry about it. I've been watching the Gulf War show on CNN for the better part of my life. It's been happening for 27 years. So as the world's attention was focused on the first combat use of the conventional mother of all bombs, the United States National Nuclear Security Administration announced the successful field test of the modernized gravity nuclear bomb in Nevada. The National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA, and the United States Air Force completed the first qualification flight test of the B-6112 gravity nuclear bomb. But they did it way back on March 14th. They're just telling us about it now because it ties in with the PR push for the mother of all bombs.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Air Force has published a report on its successful test of an inert nuclear gravity bomb. The test happened a month ago, but has only now been made public. Also, the U.S. Army is planning to add a new kinetic energy weapon to its arsenal. is being presented as a tool to counter Russian nuclear technology.
Now, what has to be weighed in fielding such a thing is portability, the ability to have something that generates that kind of energy. You can't be lugging this thing around because it's huge in its current configuration. So its ability to be fielded and made operational is many years off. In my view, Russia was put up as the boogeyman in order to justify a lot of the, not only the defense spending, but to justify that we have to have an increased military to the level that we had during the Reagan period, which is unbelievable.
So speaking of tools, as they were just mentioning in that report, like the tools that were used to bring in America's next top president. And you've already seen it. We've said it a million times, and we've said it ever since we've been online and we've been on air. Every 4 to 8 years, one team's going to be in favor, the other team's going to be out of favor. Generally speaking, when the fake Democrats are in, the problem's at home, the boogeyman's under your bed, it's militias and murderers. And then when the phony Republicans come in, we go back to bombing over there, because the Republicans are funded by war makers and weapons. But the fake Dems are funded by banks and pharmaceutical companies. So you see the sort of memes and themes that accompany their phony 4 and 8 years. And one team's in and one team's out. And a giant group of people who all were riding the Trump train are now quietly going down into their little hidey holes. Some of them not so quietly. Some of them are all excited. Some of the fakes in the alternative media are police state-loving statist whores. I still follow them on Twitter because it's still fascinating to see which way they land. Mark Dice among them. I think I've told you the story before. I booked Mark Dice for Clyde Lewis back when I was the producer of that show a few years ago. And at the time, his book, I think, was The Illuminati in the Music Industry. And he sent a book to Clyde, and it was autographed and stuff. And I even got into it. I was like, hey, man, I'd love a copy of the book as well. And he actually sent one. He sent one, and I crack it open, and it's autographed. And it says, James, thanks for introducing me to Clyde. Sure thing, buddy. You're listening to the Morning Monarchy for Monday, April 17th, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Monday is World News Day, and it's not good. India and Israel, two terrible tastes that taste terrible together, sign unprecedented $2 billion arms deal.
India and Israel signed a massive arms deal worth about $2 billion last week. Although India and Israel only established diplomatic relations in 1992, relations have never been better than in recent years, especially after the election of right-wing Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Narendra Modi announced in 2015 that he will be the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel, and the arms deal is presented as a gesture towards that visit. The arms deal will mean that India will purchase surface-to-air missiles called Barak 8, the development of unmanned aerial vehicles and security for Indian seaports. While most of the production will take place in Indian soil and by Indian workers, the technology is mainly Israeli. India has been stockpiling arms in an alarming rate in the last few years, buying more arms than it needs, more than any other country in the last decade. It has become the largest customer for Israeli arms. Israel is about the 10th largest weapons exporter in the world, but it is the largest exporter of arms per capita terms as well. Let us watch a promotional video aired by Rafael, the state-owned Israeli arms company who is running ads promoting Israeli arms in India.
This is good.
We've been together for so long, trusting friends and partners. What more can I pledge to make a future strong?
I need to feel safe and sheltered, security and protection, commitment and perfection.
Oh, my God, it cuts off. I only get that little bit in the real news. That entire 10-minute real news clip, of course, will be included in the show notes, as will Barak 8. B-A-R-A-K. Barak, you know, the Hebrew word for lightning, is an Indian-Israeli surface-to-air missile designed to defend against any type of airborne threat, except flu and biological kind of airborne threats. They're more talking about aircraft, helicopters, anti-ship missiles, and UAVs. Good stuff. Getting together for massive military deals. And you're listening to The Morning Monarchy. Good God Almighty. Despite leading in the polls for round one, The Express, I believe that's out of the UK, yeah, they're reporting that a monumental computer blunder could cost Marine Le Pen the general election in France, as 500,000 citizens living outside of France have the chance to vote twice. The elections become extremely close, with just 4.5 percentage points separating Macron, Fillon, Mélenchon, and Le Pen. Which is why this shocking error in election procedures could be the swing to crush Le Pen's hopes, as the Express reports 500,000 people received duplicate polling cards in the post in the mail, which would allow them to cast 2 votes at the first round of the election held coming up April 23rd. Whoops! French authorities confirmed they would not be investigating the potential electoral fraud until after the election, when retrospective prosecution may take place. Retrospective? Retroactive? Retrospective, it sounds like, no, we'll think about it afterwards. Hey, remember that time we didn't prosecute massive electoral fraud? Yeah. What a time to be alive. Zero Hedge is sure this is a simple accident, but coincidentally for the establishment, this could crush Ms. Le Pen's dreams of surging to power, as most French nationals living outside of their country are not right-wing, demonstrated by the fact many feel they depend on the European Union to guarantee their stay in foreign countries. Far-left candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who has surged in the polls recently and threatens to break into the leadership race against Ms. Le Pen and Mr. Macron, could also benefit from this catastrophic error. As one French citizen noted, this year, this is the first time I've asked myself the question, would I take advantage of this anomaly to vote twice? My candidate was low enough in the polls. Voting twice is a crime, but police will only find out if they run a check on the individual through their computer systems. France's Interior Ministry has said it will not be invalidating the election because of the duplicate voting glitch. That's democracy, baby. That's 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. Yum, yum, yum. It's going to be mutton stew. And now we flip around to one of the numerous other crises playing out. And we hop over to the Asia-Pacific perspective, so to speak. As tensions rise, Japan moves to update Korean crisis response. The Japanese government has been working on plans to respond to a potential crisis on the Korean peninsula since February, in light of heightened tensions stemming from Washington's response to North Korea's nuclear provocations. Discussions in the National Security Council have so far included a plan to evacuate Japanese from South Korea and measures to address the risk of North Korean soldiers infiltrating Japan, disguised, as is the popular way, as refugees.
On Friday, amid rising concern over North Korea's nuclear weapon program, a government official announced that Japan's National Security Council was discussing how to evacuate its nearly 60,000 citizens from South Korea in the event of a crisis. The announcement comes on the same day that North Korea denounced the U.S. for bringing huge nuclear strategic assets to the Korean peninsula, as a U.S. aircraft carrier group headed for the region ahead of a feared 6th nuclear missile test. According to the official, Japan would want to deploy military aircraft and ships to assist commercial ships and planes in the event of an evacuation. According to Kyodo News Agency, Japan began working on plans to respond to a potential crisis on the Korean peninsula in February, following Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's meeting with Donald Trump at a summit in the United States.
The government has also warned Japanese schools in South Korea to keep abreast of developments amid the climbing tensions, the education minister said last Friday. The email notice, dated Thursday, the day before that, instructs school administrators to gather information on the North Korea situation from Japanese diplomatic offices and local authorities to keep students safe. There are 2 schools that cater to Japanese in South Korea. They have close to 500 students and staff. The administration of America's next top president continues to assert that all options, including military action, will be considered to curtail Pyongyang's nuclear weapon and ballistic missile programs, a departure from the strategic patience doctrine of Trump's predecessor, Barack. Lightning. On Friday, as a U.S. aircraft carrier group headed to the region while the North geared up to conduct a suspected 6th nuclear test, North Korea's vice foreign minister blamed Trump for escalating tensions on the Korea Peninsula through his tweets and through the expression of military exercises, saying the U.S. was becoming more vicious and more aggressive than it had been under Obama. That, I think, kind of illustrates the point I've been making. The faces change, the R's, the D's change. But with each successive administration, it becomes more violent, more vicious, and more aggressive than the previous. We thought Clinton was bad. Bombing Serbia, bombing Somalia. That seems like child's play, compared to, of course, what comes after the catalyzing catastrophic events of 9/11. Setting the stage for everything you see. Every indignity suffered at the horrific airlines. To all the other divide and conquer. All of it in our generation, all based on 9/11. So that's why now, nearly 16 years later, that still has to be a bedrock, a benchmark. If you're just getting into all of this, that's in some ways where you have to start. I spent years before I talked openly about any of this stuff just researching it privately. Spending countless hours, days, weeks, months researching JFK 9/11. And from those 2 events, it spirals out, it ripples out, and it's going to give you even a better view at what goes on in the world. History, geopolitically, all of it. So let's continue to look at the situation in North Korea. North Korea's weapons of war rolled through Pyongyang streets Saturday, and it promised nuclear justice in response to any atomic attack as leader Kim Jong-un mounted a spectacular show of strength. Tensions over Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions are stretched to the limit, with America's next top president deploying an aircraft carrier battle group to the region. After a 21-gun salute, tens of thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen goose-stepped through Kim Il-sung Square, turning their eyes towards the high balcony. The man in the high balcony, if you will, from where Kim watched, flanked by officers and officials. Some detachments carried assault rifles or rocket-propelled grenades. Others were equipped with night vision goggles and daubed in face paint. One troop was made up of sword-wielding women. Now, we're grabbing this article from the Daily Mail, but there are amazing photos from the AFP. North Korea leader Kim Jong-un watches ranks of goose-stepping soldiers, tanks, and hardware parade in Pyongyang. I believe I would like to find pictures of sword-wielding women and make that our album art for today's episode. If you can tweet that at me, that would be great. And this is all, it's all about a celebration. Ostensibly, Saturday's event in North Korea was to mark the 105th anniversary of Kim Il-sung's birth, a date known as the Day of the Sun, S-U-N, in the north. A squadron of warplanes flew overhead, forming the number 105. I love a parade, but of course it was also intended to send an unmistakable message to Washington about the isolated country's military might. Now, what had been mentioned previously in this Japan Times article? Strategic patience is the quote. U.S. Vice President, and arguably, possibly, the man who's really president. And we talked about Karen Pence last week and her massive evangelical influence behind the scenes. Just slightly behind the scenes. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence encouraged China to take action against North Korea while he met with troops a day after Kim Jong-un's regime defied the Trump administration with a ballistic missile test. On a visit to the DMZ, that's the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, Vice President Pence said he was heartened by early signs from China and hoped its leaders would use the extraordinary levers they have to prod Kim into giving up his nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. He repeated his buddy Donald's warning that the U.S. would act without China if necessary. Quote, either China will deal with this problem or the United States and its allies will. We want to see change. We want to see North Korea abandon its reckless path. Trump and change.
The Vice President appeared at the door of Air Force 2 with his wife and 2 daughters. South Korea's Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, Kim Sung-nam, and the commander of U.S. forces in Korea, General Brooks, were there to welcome him, before heading to a wreath-laying ceremony at the National Cemetery. This is the first visit by the Vice President to the Asia-Pacific region. But early on Sunday morning, North Korea launched an unidentified missile from Sinpo, a port city on its east coast. US reports say it failed just seconds into its flight. The Vice President referred to the launch during a speech to South Korean and American troops in Seoul.
This morning's provocation from the North is just the latest reminder of the risks each one of you face every day in the defense of the freedom of the people of South Korea and the defense of America.
South Korea's government also condemned the missile launch.
North Korea showing various offensive missiles at yesterday's military parade and daring to fire a ballistic missile today is a show of force that threatens the whole world.
On the streets of South Korea, there was a backlash to perceived US meddling in the region.
As a South Korean citizen, I think we should take the lead in resolving North Korean problems, rather than passively following the US's decisions.
There has been no comment from North Korea, but publicly there was disbelief the launch had failed.
That's a lie. Our military scientists are demonstrating the power of our national forces. Scientists like me don't believe that.
Vice President Pence will also meet political and business leaders to affirm US support in the region and outline its economic agenda. Mike Pence's visit comes amid intense international attention on North Korea and its worsening relationship with the US. North Korea says it will conduct a nuclear test in the future, but hasn't indicated when. A move both US President Donald Trump and China warn will result in reprisals.
America's Next Top President's team is weighing options for preventing Kim from acquiring the ability to strike North America with a nuclear weapon. You should ask AQ Khan and Donald Rumsfeld all about that. They already took care of that for you. The administration is leaning on China, North Korea's main ally and benefactor, and seeking to bolster missile defense systems in allies South Korea and Japan. China isn't the key to resolving problems on the Korean peninsula, Foreign Ministry spokesman Liu Kang told reporters in Beijing on Monday, repeating a call for all parties to avoid any provocations. North Korea snubbed senior Chinese diplomats this month as tensions mounted with the U.S., according to people familiar with the situation, raising questions about the influence Beijing's leaders have over the country. And we're grabbing that from Bloomberg and pretty much all their most reads on the sidebar. Trump willing to consider sudden strike on North Korea. Trump ties China currency decision to help with North Korea. Oh, yeah, and also, there's totally a BP Alaska gas leak that's going on, but don't worry about any of that stuff. We'll talk about that on Wednesday on our Food, Health, and Environment show. Right now, you are still listening to your Morning Monarchy for Monday, April 17th, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato coming to you, as always, from the Media Monarchy Studios. As we start to wrap up this episode, it will still be on the Korean Peninsula. And a really interesting story and a nearly half-hour piece from Al Jazeera. I didn't even cut out a clip for you, but again, it'll be included in the shows. They call it South Korea's gender wars. And I've talked about the as above, so below, bizarro world scenario that's been playing out between the United States and South Korea since last fall, since America's Next Top President. In Korea, the murder of a young woman in the affluent Gangnam district has ignited a vicious public debate about the country's entrenched misogyny. Feminists blamed Korea's gender inequality and took to the streets, which sparked counter-protests from men's rights defenders who felt men were unfairly attacked. This debate intensified online, where feminists mirror the name-calling men direct at them. But these tactics only made the men angrier, and for some, this online conflict has painful real-life consequences. 101 East is a show on Al Jazeera, and this episode explores misogyny and murder in South Korea as a vicious gender war erupts. South Korea has one of the highest female homicide rates in the world. And that is to say, men murdering women. South Korea is one of the champs. And that's the situation we're in. So the final story I wanted to mention, I actually now realize as I'm loading up my links, in all the stories that we talk about, all the headlines I have been mentioning for the last several months, we track it and put it all together in what Twitter calls a moment. You're basically able to put tweets together in order and sort of tell a story, if you will. We put those together and tweet that out at least an hour before showtime. So if you're at your desk, if you're in a situation where you can follow along to the show, I've got all the links, I've got all the articles laid out for you. So this last one I have is from Press TV, and it's from their tweet. South Korean ex-president officially indicted. But each time I keep clicking that link, it's actually a mislink that they've done. Afghans protest U.S. dropping of massive bomb, which is an important story, but we've already talked about that a little bit earlier in this episode, although suppose we didn't really actually talk about the massive protests about that. What I do want to mention is South Korea's ousted president Park Geun-hye was on Monday charged with bribery involving millions of dollars in a scandal that caused her downfall. Park, whose impeachment was confirmed by Seoul's top court last month, also faces charges of abusing her powers and leaking state secrets, Seoul prosecutors probing the scandal said in a statement. We have formally charged Park with multiple offenses, including abuse of power, coercion, bribery, and leaking state secrets. That's their quote after wrapping up the months-long investigation. Park is accused of colluding with her confidant, Choi Soon-sil, who is already on trial, in coercing local conglomerates into donating a total of $68 million to two nonprofit foundations. Does any of this sound vaguely like Hillary to you? That's why I found this story so fascinating, that at the very moment everybody thought, and myself included, it's going to be Hillary. This parallel story plays out where someone, much like Hillary, someone who has much like, now her name escapes me. Who's Anthony Weiner's long Sahuma Abedin? You've got Hillary, Huma, you've got their shady-ass nonprofit foundations. Now, in America, it's possible, had Hillary been elected, all of that would have hit the fan that much more. And Huma would have gone down, and all of the stuff would have continued to spill out. It didn't go that way, and all those things have slowly been swept away and slowly swept under the rug. It's almost as though it played out instead in South Korea for essentially the same crimes. Cronies running governments and letting their friends do whatever in the name of their fake foundations that are set up to support their crony-ass friends. Crony-ass friends. That's how we wrap up your Morning Monarchy and all your geopolitics news. Again, all of those headlines we get to you ahead of the show. And then, of course, when you're listening to this after we're live, we get this podcast posted about an hour after we are off air, and that will have all of your show notes, all in order. We're going to go out with some pretty sweet neo-soul music from a Toronto singer-songwriter named Tanika Charles. And it's a fantastic song called Soul Run. We're going to do that in a few minutes. But of course, first, as always, it's kind of one of my favorite parts. It's This Day in History. I love This Day in History, anniversary notes, birthdays. To me, it's the syncs. It's the coincidences. It's the memes and themes that continually hit. And I find it always a really illuminating way to look at the world and to learn about history and to learn about what's happening now, then, and what's coming next. This day in history, April 17th, 1397, Geoffrey Chaucer tells the Canterbury Tales for the first time at the court of Richard II. Chaucer scholars have also identified this date 1 decade prior, 1387, as the start of the book's pilgrimage to Canterbury. It might be a sad thing. The main thing I remember from Canterbury Tales, you got to be the guy that carries the food if you're going on a big expedition, because it's only going to get lighter, because everybody's going to eat the food as you go along. I'm sure there were other lessons. April 17th, as we jump far ahead to the contemporary and modern era, we go from 1397 to 1960. On this day, April 17th in 1960, Eddie Cochran died in Bath, England, from severe brain injury sustained in a massive car wreck in Chippenham, Wiltshire. Also in that car, Gene Vincent. He was seriously injured in the accident that killed his buddy Eddie Cochran. And on this day, April 17th, 1961, a group of Cuban exiles financed and trained by the CIA lands at the Bay of Pigs in Cuba with the aim, ostensibly, of ousting Fidel Castro.
It started with a bang. Troops marched through Havana's Revolution Plaza while tanks rumbled down the street and fighter jets tore through the sky. A military parade to celebrate Cuba's past victories. It was 50 years ago that the small Caribbean island defeated a U.S.-backed invasion at the Bay of Pigs. Now, it was led by Cuban exiles, but as far as the United States was concerned, it was a complete failure. Not only did they fail to take Fidel Castro's forces by surprise, but the U.S. didn't provide air cover, and finally, the Cubans themselves didn't rise up. The parade kicked off a crucial congress of the island's Communist Party. In fact, its first in 14 years. President Raul Castro delivered the real punches when party members sat down for their 4-day meeting. He told delegates that after more than half a century of one-family rule in Cuba, it was time to set limits on public office. We recommend limiting the fundamental political and state offices to a maximum of 2 consecutive periods of 5 years, he said. His older brother, Fidel Castro, was in power from 1959 until 2006, when illness forced him to step down. Raul Castro took over and was officially elected 2 years later. In the 2.5-hour speech, short by his brother's standards, Raul Castro said the country now must prepare a new generation to take over in the next 5 years. Castro convened the summit to implement radical economic changes, allowing more private enterprise as the state sheds more than 1 million jobs. Since October, some 200,000 Cubans have taken out licenses to open small businesses, to sell everything from homemade pizzas to DVDs. The law allowing self-employment is very important. It's going to allow the country to develop, this man says. Castro also told the party summit that Cubans would soon be allowed to buy and sell homes and cars, something they haven't been able to do for decades.
That's the Cuban News Network, the Communist News Network, the Clinton News Network, remembering the Bay of Pigs invasion now 56 years later. That video originally published 6 years ago today. We're looking at this day in history because past is prologue. April 17th, 1964, the FBI lab reported that it could not determine the lyrics to Louie Louie. Of course, recorded up here in the Pacific Northwest. April 17th, 1969, Sirhan Sirhan was convicted on this day of assassinating Robert F. Kennedy. The last thing I remember was some girl in a polka dot dress gave me a drink, and then it's all fuzzy. Then the next thing I remember, giant football star Rosie Greer can't knock the gun out of a tiny little Palestinian midget's hand. April 17th, 1970, Johnny Cash performed at the White House at the invitation of President Richard Milhous Nixon. Johnny Cash played A Boy Named Sue. April 17th, 1980, Bob Marley and the Wailers performed as the official guests of State of Zimbabwe's Independence Festival. And on this day, April 17th, 2014, NASA's Kepler confirms the discovery of the first Earth-sized planet in the habitable zone of another star. Now, published to Media Monarchy a decade ago today, there was a whole batch of stories, as you might have known over the weekend. And again, we always miss the day in histories that happen over the weekend, and as the years go by and the days sort of change and fall, I'm not necessarily hitting the same days in history. Over the weekend, we had the 10th anniversary of the Virginia Tech shooting, where 32 were killed, and if you add in the gunman himself, it's 33. So I had several postings a decade ago on Media Monarchy about the Virginia Tech shooting. But I'll begin with actually one that you didn't hear about. A Virginia shooting you won't hear about, and it was basically where a gunman was stopped by other college students who were lawful gun owners. But those kind of stories don't really make the headlines. You only hear the headlines about the stories of massive, disarmed populations waiting for the state to come help them. Anger over U.S. shooting warnings. That was from the BBC. Survivors of the worst shooting rampage in U.S. history have accused authorities of not acting quickly enough to alert people a gunman was on the loose. Campus gun ban disarmed Virginia victims. And lastly, not related to Virginia Tech, 9/11 responders divided over Sicko. Controversial filmmaker Michael Moore's new movie examining the American healthcare system is getting both jeers and cheers for taking ailing 9/11 responders to Cuba for treatment. That was Michael Moore's Sicko. All those articles were published 10 years ago today to MediaMonarchy.com, and I think I've mentioned doing a little bit of updates to the website. We're constantly trying to work on updates behind the scenes and build more, better things for the Media Monarchy community. But lastly, I want to mention as we're wrapping up this day in history, my friends, the birthdays. April 17th, 1837. A little guy named J.P. Morgan was born on this day. Also born on April 17th, Thornton Wilder, of course, playwright, Our Town. William Holden, star of Network and many other films like Sunset Boulevard. Crazed producer Don Kirshner. It's also Billy Fury's birthday, Jan Hammer's birthday, the late, great Roddy Piper, born on this day in 1954. It's also Pete Shelley of the Buzzcocks' birthday, Africa Bambaataa, Nick Hornby, Maynard from Tool, Liz Phair, Redman, and West Virginia girl, Jennifer Garner. I don't think any of those musical folks are going to make their way into our daily DJ set at noon because it is a new Music Monday, my friends. We've had so much more new music coming in because I've got a producer now, our buddy Sean Cathcart, who you know on the tweets, who even supplied some of the geopolitics tweets today. He's been working as my new music producer, and that's hooking us up with more bands, more labels, more record promoters, and I got music, I'm swimming in it. That was the one thing I was able to kind of do in the Media Monarchy Kingdom over the weekend, was edit and work on some of the new music we got coming. So as I wrap up your Morning Monarchy, your hour of news each and every morning, Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time, I want to invite you to join us for our daily DJ set at noon. I think it's the nice way if you want to try and turn people on to Media Monarchy. You know, of course, you got to pick and choose your fights and pick and choose your people. But maybe if you got a tech friend, tell them about the Tuesday episodes of your Morning Monarchy, the Cyberspace War episodes. Maybe they just like the crazy, dark, conspiratorial stuff. Tell them about the Thursday Holy Hexes episodes of your Morning Monarchy. Or maybe, like the sneakiest way, tell them about the music show. They will dig the music show. What's the old TV stuff? You know, unless they're weird, your friends are going to dig Media Monarchy. So I'd appreciate you if you tell a friend about us. And yes, it is theft weekend, which means most of us have all had to file away our thefts. And you might get some returns. May I be so bold is to request you might throw a little bit of your tax returns to independent, non-commercial alternative media. Maybe not just me, maybe any of it. If you find these shows valuable, if they've resonated for you, we appreciate your support. You've never heard an ad, you've never seen any pre-roll ads on our YouTube channel, none of that stuff. We're not monetized in that way because we don't want to do our work that way. We want to do our work for you with your support. MediaMonarchy.com/support, PayPal, Patreon, Bitcoin, and the post office box. Much love and thanks. We are going out with Toronto soul singer Tanika Charles. I think this song is pretty sweet. It's called Soul Run, and I think you're going to dig it, my friends. So that's going to do it for your Morning Monarchy for April 17th, 2017. And I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com, thanking you once again, my friends, for taking part and listening and tuning in and being involved and being engaged and leading with love. And I'm reminding you, as always, like our buddy Jello Biafra said, don't hate the media, become the media. Take care.
Once lived my life on the prairies, not by choice. He told me we gon' get married. I was low, left behind kitchen doors. Got a woman feeling back and weary. Cooking that crab meat, drinking the bath. Flew in a trailer full of a blast. Flies on the window, feels like that. Time to cheat my running. I'm on the road again, I can never go back, never back. I'm on the road again, I can never go back, never back. I'm on the road again, I can never go back, never back. No more, no more. Said, baby, you're a cold one, but I had to leave that town. Take it to the road, so run, so run. I make a mess every place I go. Why should here be different? Hey, I'm so fly, I got so getting so much trouble. Got a bunch of brothers fighting over me. One on my bracelet, one on my mind. Both getting anxious. Alright. I got my kicks and I said goodbye to both. Time to cheat my running. Yeah. I'm on the road again, I can never go back, never back. I'm on the road again, I can never go back, never back. I'm on the road again, I can never go back, never back, never. Yeah. Said, baby, you're a cold one, but I was having too much fun to care. Take it to the road, hon. So run, so run. So run, so I'm leaving. Said I'm leaving. You gon' catch me walking out the door. See ya later. Said I'm leaving, now I'm leaving you, I'm leaving. Put my bags inside your Jeep, I stole your keys and now I'm speeding. I'm leaving. Said I'm leaving, now I'm leaving you, I'm leaving.
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato. Since 2005, Media Monarchy has covered the real news about politics, health, technology and the occult, all remixed with music and media that matters. Go to MediaMonarchy.com/support and become a monthly subscriber so you can help keep independent, non-commercial, alternative media going and growing. Thanks.